Hello everyone and welcome to Canteen Cup. My name is Scott and once again we are inside because it is raining cats and dogs outside. We've had thunderstorms since last night and it just doesn't seem like it's ever going to end, but rain is good and I always feel like I have to do something even if I can't be outside doing it, so I thought I would go ahead and shoot a video. And sorry for being indoors this time, but it is what it is. So in my last video I talked about being a Minuteman, or what a Minuteman is or was, and I wanted to go into a short series on what I consider a Minuteman, what that concept is, and then how we would apply it to today, because I think it's very similar compared to the Revolutionary War Minuteman, and that is that you are ready to act on something. I think in today's world that we use a lot of the same concepts and maybe modify that a little bit as far as being in a preparedness community. So this is going to be a series, and it's not going to be a one after another series. I may do one or two of these and then do something else for a while and then come back to it, but I will try to title all this series the Minuteman series and maybe put it in its own playlist. So today in this video I want to talk about what is the Minuteman concept, or at least what is my version of the Minuteman concept and how it applies to today. And I think it's important that we have this concept, and I think it's important that we be able to execute this concept. So what are my concepts as far as being a Minuteman we'll say in my world? And the way I feel about it is a Minuteman is someone who is ready and able to assist their neighbors and or their community. It may or may not be your mutual assistance group. It may or may not be your crew, but if your neighbor calls, you should be able to respond and help them, especially if our society devolves. So that being said, really what is the concept? The concept is being able to assist your neighbors and your community to mitigate the unexpected. Now what do I mean by that? Well, typically things don't happen at 1 o'clock in the afternoon all day every day. They happen all times of day, all times of night, and so you have to be prepared to respond to that all times of day, all times of night. And typically when it happens, it's unexpected. The zombies are marching down your road and your neighbor calls you that he needs help to fend them off or to divert them off of your street onto somebody else's street. Protect your community. So he's calling all the neighbors to get everybody as a group to defend their families. It goes to the concept of not defending your family at your mailbox, but going out, to meet the issue and mitigate it as far away from your home as possible. I think part of being a Minuteman is that you have to be kind of grab and go, just like we envision the Minutemen back in the Revolutionary War. They had their musket and their shooting bags and maybe their cloaks by the door so that they can get up, throw their breeches on, throw a shirt on, pull their boots on, and as they're heading out the door they grab their musket and their bag and they go. So we have to be prepared. You're not prepared if you have your gun in one room, your bullets in another room, your first aid kit in another room, and you have to spend an hour pulling all this together to go. You should have that all together in one spot, ready to rock, so to speak. I think being a Minuteman, it's pretty much local in nature. In other words, it's going to be, whatever the task is, it'll be local. It'll be at your place, your neighbor's place, your community's place. You're not going to be far away from home. You're not going to load up in trucks and drive for a couple hours. If you are, then that's a whole different scenario, and it's a whole different methodology as far as planning and execution. But what I'm talking about, like I said, your neighbor calls up and says there are people stealing his cows and he needs your help to run them off, or there's a pack of coyotes attacking his newborn sheep and he needs a few extra shot. Can you go help? That's what I mean. So in addition to it being local, it's probably going to be short term. What do I mean by short term? Well, your neighbor, if your neighbor calls you up, let's just say to shoot some coyotes that are attacking his sheep, then that may only last a couple hours. Maybe some bad guys are in the neighborhood and you need to run a patrol. Well, that only may be a half a day to a day before you can get back home. Again, like I said, it's not like you're loading up in a pickup truck and driving for a couple hours. You may be called to help or serve for a couple hours, maybe a day. So it is short term. So you don't have to think about, camping gear, sleeping bags, tents. It's just, you just need to support yourself for maybe up to a day. And we'll talk about that when what I want to do is go through the concepts, and then in other videos talk about what does that really look like, what does that mean. So that being said, you have to be prepared to locally, short term, and you should be self-sustaining. So do you have, I'm not saying you have to bring 3 full meals with you, but hey, a couple granola bars and a canteen of water can hold most people for a day. Yeah, you'll be a little hungry, but that's okay, because there's a big meal waiting for you when you get home. On top of that is that you've got to be all weather. In other words, you're not going to bring all your summer gear and all your winter gear and all your wet weather gear every time you go out. Hopefully you're watching the weather at least on a daily basis, so you kind of know that if you get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe it's going to be cold, maybe it's going to be rainy, maybe it's going to be cold and rainy, maybe it's going to be warm. So you have an idea of how to dress, when the flare goes up. Like today, it's rainy and warm, so I know I either need to have a poncho or a rain jacket when I go out. Am I worried about getting a little wet? In this scenario, not so much, because I know probably within a day I'll be back home inside and I can change clothes or whatever. So, throwing on a rain jacket or throwing on a poncho will probably be just fine for what I'm going to do for the day. That being said, you should be traveling light. In other words, everything you need should pretty much be on your person, and you should still be fairly agile in your movements. In other words, you may have to get in your truck and drive to your neighbors because they're a quarter mile away, or you may have to negotiate some thick woods, which is a lot around me. You may have to get in and out of buildings or whatever. So you need to think about traveling light, not having full battle rattle, and not being able to move. and it's being able to, respond to yourself, to your problems or your neighbor's problems. And then finally, you need to be fairly inconspicuous. And really what I'm talking about is kind of a gray man thing, but you need to be fairly inconspicuous in how you're out there with all your stuff. An example might be, let's say some bad guys, a carload of people came into your neighborhood, and they just thought they were going to terrorize the neighborhood, and they're going to come in, they're going to rob houses, steal from cars and whatever. Well, your neighbors figured this out, called everybody up, and everybody grabbed their stuff and went to mitigate the problem. Well, let's say in the ensuing confrontation that either shots are fired or somebody got shot, or now maybe the police are involved and ambulance and stuff, and so really now's the time you have to worry about how are you going to present yourself, and you may not have time to ditch your gear. So if you have your spare rifle magazines in a little shoulder pouch instead of full battle rattle chest rig with armor plate, well, you don't look like you were looking for a fight. And if you have a pretty slimmed down AR-15, you can just drop that along the side of your body and kind of hide it a little bit. Whereas if you've got an 11-pound AR-15 with every gizmo on you can't hide that, and it looks like you were looking for trouble. And that's not the impression you want to give to the people that are coming to your help, that you were looking for trouble or asking for trouble. You were, in bed, your neighbor called, you got up, you grabbed your rifle that you usually shoot coyotes with at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you go out there to help them. And that presents a big figure. The other part of that is you may have the opportunity to fade away. And so, you can lower your AR-15 down by your side, and you can kind of move away from whatever crowd there was, and maybe even just start walking down the road. Whereas if you are in full battle rattle with military style camouflage and one of those little helmets on and everything, a policeman's going to look at you and say, you need to stop and come back here, because I need to find out what you were doing and why you were dressed like that. And so I guess the operative word maybe isn't necessarily being inconspicuous or being gray man, but you need to blend in with everybody else. You don't need to look out of place. And so that's kind of my concept of a Minuteman. To kind of sum it up, it's short term, it's local. You're not going out there loaded for bear. You're traveling light. You should be able to respond to whatever the current weather conditions is. You're not going to be out there long. You need to be self-sufficient. And you need to know your neighbors. And you need to know your neighbors. You need to have their phone numbers. You need to have the community that, one, they'll call you if there's a problem, and maybe just to warn you, and two, they may call you because they need to help you, and three, you may be calling them because they need to help you, and they are the closest to you to help. And so it pays to develop your community. I can't say that enough. You don't have to eat dinner with them every Saturday, but you need to know them, and you need to get to know them well enough that you all kind of respect each other and kind of know what each other's about. And so if something bad does happen, well, you may not want to call all your neighbors, but you at least know which ones to call that'll give you the most help. So stay tuned, more to follow. We are going to go into some more of the concepts and some of the ideas behind it. And I'll show some gear and some equipment and stuff, but keep it simple. The KISSA principle applies. You don't want to overload on gear. You don't want to overload on stuff. You don't want to overthink this. So we'll do a series of some things, and I'll bring out some gear. I think I'm kind of set up here maybe to do one on knives, because I was working on some of my knives today, and just a brief talk about that. So everybody out there, stay safe, stay secure, and for those that are in Alabama and Georgia, stay dry. We'll see you.